You know the person, someone bumps into them on the sidewalk, shoulder first, no warning, and they're the one who says sorry. A waiter brings the wrong order, and they apologize before the waiter can. A friend shows up 20 minutes late, and they say sorry for waiting. You've probably done a version of this yourself, the word out of your mouth before you've even worked out whether you did anything wrong. That's not politeness. Politeness has a target and an end point, a person you actually inconvenienced, and a moment where the debt is paid. This is something else, a reflex that fires whenever the emotional temperature in a room rises even slightly, aimed at nobody's actual mistake, just at the discomfort of the moment existing at all. There's a common assumption that this is mostly a women's habit, that women apologize on reflex, while men just don't bother. One pair of researchers actually tested that, having people log every real apology they gave and received over 2 weeks. Women did apologize more, that part held up. But once the researchers counted how many of a person's own actions they personally judged worth an apology, the difference between men and women vanished. Men weren't tougher or less willing to admit fault. They just set the bar for what counts as their fault higher. Which is the whole point of this video. The reflex isn't a gender trait, it's a threshold, and it gets set early in childhood before anyone's old enough to have a stereotype pinned on them. Psychologists who study social behavior have a name for what that reflex is doing. Apologizing, even a small, unnecessary one, functions as a submission signal, the same category of behavior as backing down, lowering your voice, or making yourself smaller in an argument. People who behave this way habitually in conflict report more shame and more social anxiety than people who don't, and researchers have found the same pattern whether they're studying college students or people who have been clinically diagnosed with depression. In social animals, this kind of signal settles disputes without violence. One party signals no threat, and the conflict ends before it escalates. In you, it does the same job at a dinner table or in a meeting, just without anyone naming it, and often over something that was never yours to fix in the first place. Most people who apologize this way learned it early, and they learned it for a good reason at the time. If you grew up in a house where a raised voice meant the day was about to go badly, you figured out fast that being the one who smooths things over, who takes the blame before blame gets assigned, keeps everyone calmer for longer. It worked. It got you through childhood dinners and car rides with less shouting. The trouble is, your nervous system doesn't retire a strategy just because the danger that built it is gone. It keeps running the same program in a grocery store queue, in a work meeting, in a relationship with someone who's never once raised a hand or a voice at you. It shows up in specific ordinary moments once you start looking for it. Apologizing for asking a question in a meeting, apologizing to a partner for having a bad day, as if your mood is an imposition on theirs, apologizing to a shop assistant for taking too long to decide. None of these are mistakes. They're small, automatic bids to keep someone else's reaction from turning unpleasant, paid in advance, before there was ever a bill to pay. And it carries a cost most people never clock, because the cost isn't obvious in the moment. A study published in 2023 tracked how people are actually perceived when they apologize often compared with people who apologize rarely. The frequent apologizers came across as warmer, more agreeable, easier to like, but they were also rated as noticeably less assertive and less powerful than the infrequent apologizers, and that particular gap in perceived power widened sharply whenever the apology felt automatic rather than earned. In other words, the habit that's meant to keep the peace is quietly training the people around you to take you less seriously, especially on the exact kind of apology this video is about. The reflexive one, not the one you actually owe. There's an internal version of the same cost. Researchers who study what's called self-silencing, muting your own needs and opinions to keep a relationship smooth, have found it tracks closely with depression. The correlation shows up again and again across very different groups of women, from college students to women staying in domestic violence shelters, contexts about as far apart as you can get, which is part of what makes the finding hard to dismiss. Constantly apologizing for existing isn't neutral. It's a slow, repeated rehearsal of the idea that your presence is an inconvenience someone else has to tolerate, even when you've done absolutely nothing wrong. Here's the part that should surprise you. A group of Australian researchers ran an experiment where people had a chance to apologize for something and instead refused. The people who withheld the apology didn't feel guiltier afterward. They reported higher self-esteem, a stronger sense of control, and a firmer sense of their own integrity than the people who apologized anyway. Saying sorry, it turns out, isn't automatically the thing that makes you feel better. Sometimes it's the thing you do instead of feeling in control. Real courtesy repairs something specific. Appeasement tries to prevent a mood from ever existing in the first place. That's the line worth learning to feel for. Courtesy has an object, a mistake you can name. Appeasement has no object. It's aimed at the room, not at a person, and it fires whether you did anything or not. None of this means you should stop apologizing altogether. An apology aimed at a real mistake is still one of the more useful tools you have. It repairs trust faster than almost anything else. The distinction isn't whether you say the word, it's whether you could actually point to what you did wrong if someone asked. The next time the word is halfway out of your mouth, it's worth a half-second pause to ask yourself that exact question. If you can't answer it, you were probably never at fault. You were just managing someone else's mood again, the way you learned to a long time ago, in a house where that was the safest job available to you. Naming that difference out loud or just to yourself is usually enough to start setting the threshold back where it belongs. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If this video gave you something to think about, do one small thing. Subscribe to Cool My Mind Psychology. Every video here unpacks the hidden psychology behind how we think, feel, and act, and subscribing is how you'll never miss the next one. Take care of your mind, and I will see you in the next video.